The Tale of the Fox Turning into a Giant Cedar Tree and Being Shot, number 37. Once upon a time, during the era of Shak, there was a man named Nakatomi no Sashuk who served as the chief priest of Kasuga Shrine. He had a nephew named Naka no Dainagon Shashi. One day, when this Naka no Dainagon lost his horse's feed, he said, I shall search for it, and with only one servant, set out with his quiver of arrows. He lived in a place called Mihashi, to the south of the capital of Nara. Naka no Dainagon left Mihashi and ventured into the eastern mountains, searching as he went. After walking about 20 to 30 cho, the day ended, and it became night. The moon was hazy. Could the horse's feed be here? He wondered as he continued searching. In the distance, he spotted a giant cedar tree, appearing to be as large as two house roofs and about 20 jo, around 60 meters in height. The tree stood a little further away, so Naka no Dainagon approached it, sat down, and called his servant over. Is this my eyes playing tricks on me? Or have I been misled by something and wandered into an unfamiliar place? Do you see this large cedar tree as well? He asked the servant. The servant replied, Yes, I see it as well. Naka no Dainagon then said, So it's not a mere hallucination of mine. It seems I've encountered a deceiving spirit and have wandered into a strange place. I have never heard of a cedar tree of such size in this land. Have you seen anything like it before? The servant replied, I do not recall seeing anything like this. There are cedar trees here and there, but they are all much smaller than this. Nakano Dainagon said, That confirms it. We've been misled. What should we do? This is extremely frightening. Let's go back. How many cho have we already traveled from home? This is a truly unsettling situation. As he prepared to return, the servant said, If we pass by this without doing anything, it would be too strange to ignore. Let's shoot an arrow into this cedar tree and return in the morning to investigate. Nakano Dainagon agreed. That is indeed a good idea. Let's both shoot together. So, both the master and servant nocked their arrows. The servant suggested, Let's move a bit closer before shooting. Together, they approached the tree and shot their arrows simultaneously. As soon as they heard the sound of the arrows hitting their mark, the cedar tree suddenly disappeared. Naka no Dainagon exclaimed, See, we've encountered something otherworldly. This is terrifying. Let's go back. They hurried back as if fleeing. At dawn, Naka no Dainagon called his servant and said, Let's return to the place from last night and check what happened. Together, they went to the spot, and there they found an old fox, with all its fur gone, holding a branch of a cedar tree in its mouth. The fox lay dead with two arrows stuck in its belly. Seeing this, Naka no Dainagon remarked, So it was this wretch that deceived us last night and pulled out the arrows before heading home. This event must have happened within the past 2 or 3 years. Even in these latter days, such rare occurrences still happen. Thus, the story teaches us that wandering down unfamiliar paths may lead to strange and dangerous encounters. Thus, the story has been passed down. The Tale of the Fox, Changing into the Shape of a Woman and Encountering Harima no Yasutaka, number 38. Once upon a time, there was a servant of the imperial guard named Harima no Yasutaka, the son of Ukon no Shogun Sadamasa. Yasutaka was once in service to Hokunin Temple. While he was still young, the lord was residing in the imperial palace. Since Yasutaka's home was located in Nishikyo, he stayed within the palace, but as his servant was nowhere to be seen, he decided to visit his home in Nishikyo alone. It was around the 10th day of the 9th month, and the moon was exceptionally bright. The night grew late as Yasutaka passed through the Matsubara no-en area. Ahead of him, he saw a young woman wearing a deep-dyed awabi undergarment overlaid with a robe of violet silk. Her appearance and the way she carried herself were indescribably elegant under the moonlight. Yasutaka, wearing long kutsus, approached and walked beside her. He noticed that she concealed her face with a fan beautifully adorned with paintings, never allowing him a clear view of her features. Her forehead and cheeks were framed by strands of hair that hung loosely, giving her an air of refined grace. As Yasutaka came closer and brushed against her, he smelled a strong scent of incense. At such a late hour, where might you be going? Yasutaka asked. The young woman replied, I am headed to Nishikyo as someone has called for me. Yasutaka then said, Rather than going to someone else's place, why not come with me? At this, the woman laughed gently and replied, "How could I trust someone I don't even know?" Her voice was filled with charm and affection. As they exchanged words and continued walking together, they entered the gates of the Imperial Guard quarters. Yasutaka began to have doubts, thinking, "I've heard that there's a fox in Toyorakuin that deceives people. Could this woman be one of those spirits? The fact that she has yet to show me her face is suspicious." With this in mind, Yasutaka grasped her sleeve and said, "Stay here for a moment. I have something to ask." The woman, covering her face with her fan, gave a radiant smile. Yasutaka then declared, "Actually, I'm a thief, and I'm going to take your clothing." As he said this, he untied her sash and pulled at her clothing. Drawing a blade that gleamed like ice, he pointed it at the woman and threatened, "I'll cut your throat unless you hand over your clothes." He then grabbed her by the hair, pressed her against a pillar, and placed the blade at her neck. In that moment, the woman, trembling in fear, suddenly let out a foul-smelling stream of urine. Shocked, Yasutaka let her go, and in an instant, the woman transformed into a fox and dashed out of the gate, yelping as it ran towards Omiya. The fox escaped into the distance. Yasutaka watched this and lamented, "I hesitated to kill it, thinking it might be a person. Had I known it was a fox from the start, I would have killed it without hesitation." Though he regretted letting it escape, he had no choice but to let the matter rest. After this incident, Yasutaka continued to walk through the palace paths, both at night and at dawn, but perhaps because the fox had learned its lesson, he never encountered it again. The fox had transformed into a stunning woman in an attempt to deceive Yasutaka, yet he had avoided being killed through some extraordinary stroke of luck. Thus, if one encounters a beautiful woman while alone in an isolated field, it is wise to be cautious and not approach too quickly. This, too, has been passed down as a lesson from Yasutaka's experience of not falling prey to the woman's charms. Thus, the story has been passed down. The Tale of the Fox Changing into the Shape of a Married Woman and Coming Home, number 39. Once upon a time, the wife of a servant in the capital went out onto the main road at dusk, as night began to fall, for an urgent errand. She was gone for quite some time, and her husband began to worry, thinking, "Why is she so late in coming back?" Just as he was waiting, his wife returned. However, after a short while, another woman, looking exactly the same as his wife, with no discernible difference in her appearance or manner, also entered the house. The husband, seeing this, was utterly astonished. Surely one of them must be a fox or something of that nature, he thought, but he couldn't determine which one was his real wife. He pondered the situation and concluded, the wife who came in second must be the fox. With this in mind, he drew his sword and rushed at the second woman, ready to strike her down. She, however, cried out in tears, saying, "What are you doing? Why would you do this to me?" Confused, the husband then turned to the first wife and charged at her, intending to cut her down. But she too began to weep and beg, wringing her hands in despair. Tormented by uncertainty, the husband became increasingly agitated and ran back and forth between the two women, trying to figure out the truth. In the end, he began to suspect the first wife who had come in, so he grabbed her and held her down. At that moment, she let out a foul-smelling stream of urine, and the stench became unbearable. As the husband released her in disgust, the woman suddenly transformed into a fox and dashed out through the open door, escaping down the road while howling loudly. The husband, though filled with anger and regret, could do nothing. He realized that he had let the fox escape without any real resolution. Reflecting on the incident, people said, the man must have been lacking in judgment. If only he had captured both women and tied them up for a while, the truth would have eventually been revealed. It's such a shame he let the fox get away. The people from the village gathered to witness the commotion and spoke of how pointless the fox's deception had been. The fox, having narrowly escaped death, had taken on the form of the man's wife after seeing her on the main road and tried to deceive him. Thus, in situations like this, one must remain calm and think things through carefully. It was fortunate that the man did not end up killing his real wife, for that would have been a grave mistake. This, too, has been passed down as a lesson from the tale. Thus, the story has been passed down. The Tale of the Fox, Entrusting a Gem to a Man and Returning it in Gratitude, number 40. Once upon a time, there was a person suffering from a possession by a spirit. The spirit spoke through the possessed woman, saying, I am a fox. I have not come here to bring harm or cause a curse. I was simply wandering about thinking, this place seems to have food scattered around naturally, and while I was looking around, I was captured and imprisoned like this. The fox then took a small white gem, about the size of a small orange, out from its bosom and tossed it up into the air, making it shine like a jewel. Those who witnessed this thought, what a strange and fascinating gem. This woman must have been carrying it all along, intending to deceive us, and began to suspect her. Among the onlookers was a brave young man, a servant, who, seeing the fox toss up the gem, suddenly caught it in midair and tucked it into his bosom. The fox, still speaking through the woman, cried out, How outrageous! Give me back my gem! And began to plead earnestly for its return. However, the man ignored the pleas and remained calm. The fox, now in tears, begged the man, Even if you take the gem, it will be of no use to you since you do not know how to wield its power. For me, losing the gem is a great misfortune. If you do not return it, I will become your eternal enemy. But if you give it back, I will protect you like a god. The man, moved by the fox's desperation, asked, If I return the gem, will you truly become my guardian? The fox replied, Yes, I swear I will. I am not one to speak falsehoods, and I always repay debts of gratitude. The man then said, Show me proof that you will protect me as a guardian spirit. The fox responded, Indeed, the guardian deities can hear me. If you return the gem, I will certainly become your protector. Hearing this, the man took the gem out of his bosom and handed it to the woman. The fox, still possessing the woman, received it with great joy. Afterward, the fox was chased away by an exorcist and fled. Later, when the people examined the woman, they found no trace of the gem in her bosom, proving that it had indeed belonged to the fox. Everyone realized that it had been a true possession. Sometime afterward, the young man who had taken the gem was returning from visiting the temple at Uzumasa. As it grew dark, he left the hall and began to make his way home. As night fell, he found himself passing through Uchino. When he reached the vicinity of the Otenmon gate, he suddenly felt an overwhelming sense of dread and wondered, what could this be? Then he remembered, there was that fox who promised to protect me. Standing alone in the dark, he called out, Fox! Fox! And in response, the fox appeared, howling loudly. The man looked and saw that it was indeed the fox. Thinking to himself, so it was true, he turned to the fox and said, My dear fox, you were not lying. I am grateful. I am trying to pass through this place, but it is very frightening. Please guide me. The fox, seeming to understand, looked back at the man and began to lead him, glancing back repeatedly as it walked. The man followed behind. Eventually, they veered off the main road and onto a different path. The fox suddenly stopped and crouched down, moving stealthily, as if trying not to be seen. The man mimicked the fox, creeping forward quietly. As they carefully peered ahead, they saw a group of people armed with bows and weapons, making secret plans. Listening from behind the wall, the man overheard them discussing how they would soon break into a house. It seemed they were thieves, preparing to commit a robbery. The path they were on was the main road the thieves intended to use. Knowing this, the fox had led the man through a safer route, avoiding the danger entirely. Once they were clear of the thieves, the fox disappeared and the man safely returned home. This was not the only time the fox protected the man. Many times thereafter, the fox would come to his aid, fulfilling its promise to act as his guardian. The man, realizing how the fox had kept its word, grew ever more grateful. He thought, if I had not given the gem back, I would have been doomed to misfortune. How wise I was to have returned it. Reflecting on this, people say that creatures like the fox, though not human, know how to repay kindness and never tell lies. Therefore, when a situation arises where one can help such creatures, one should always assist them. Though humans have hearts and should understand the principles of cause and effect, sometimes they are less grateful than even beasts. Thus, this story has been passed down. The Tale of Kino Tōsuke and the Woman's Spirit. Once upon a time, to the east of Ninnaji, there flowed a river called Koyo. At the riverbank in the evening, there stood a young girl, pure in appearance. When someone rode by on a horse heading towards Kyoto, the girl said, "I shall ride on that horse's rear to Kyoto." The rider replied, "Get on," and allowed her to mount. For about 4 or 5 towns, she rode on the horse's rear, but suddenly fell off and fled. When pursued, she transformed into a fox and dashed away, crying out. Such occurrences had been heard to happen repeatedly. At Takiguchi, many were gathered to share stories, and when the tale of the Koyo River girl riding on others' horses was mentioned, a young man from Tiguchi with a bold heart proclaimed, "I shall certainly catch that girl. Should she escape due to someone else's clumsiness, that won't be the case for me." The courageous Takiguchi men, hearing this, replied, "Let us see if you can catch her." The young man asserted, "Very well, I will catch her for sure tomorrow night." The others, filled with bravado, disagreed, and on the appointed night he set out alone, riding an exceptionally fine horse to the Koyo River, but upon crossing, the girl was nowhere to be seen. Turning back towards Kyoto, he finally spotted the girl standing. Seeing him pass, she called out cheerfully, "Please let me ride on your horse's rear." The Takiguchi man replied, "Quickly get on. Where do you intend to go?" The girl responded, "I wish to go to Kyoto, and I thought to ride on your horse's rear until sunset." He promptly allowed her to mount. While she was riding, the Takiguchi man, having prepared a rope, tied her waist to the saddle. The girl asked, "What is this you are doing?" He answered, "As it is evening, and I may want to hold you while we sleep, I thought you might try to escape." As they set off, it was already dark. Riding eastward, as they passed through the western Daitoku, he saw many fires lit from the east, with carts moving in a continuous stream, rushing towards them. The Takiguchi man thought, "It must be the work of some notable person," and he turned back, proceeding down to the western Daitoku and eastward from Nijo until reaching the area of the eastern Daitoku, moving on to the Tsuchimikado Gate. He told her to wait at the Tsuchimikado Gate and asked if any attendants were present. She replied, "They are all here," and around 10 men appeared. At that moment, he untied the rope binding the girl, seized her by the arm, and entered through the gate. Once inside, he lit a fire and headed towards the main residence. The Takiguchi men, all waiting, wondered what was happening, and the girl cried out, "Please let me go now. I am just a poor girl." However, they refused to release her, and as they prepared to proceed, the Takiguchi men gathered around her, lighting the fire bright, and declared, "Let her go within this circle." The Takiguchi man insisted, "She shall not escape. We will not allow it." And everyone drew arrows, ready to shoot, saying, "Just let her go. It would be interesting to see. Aim at her waist. One of us must shoot her." Then at that moment, the girl transformed into a fox and cried out as she fled. The Takiguchi men who had surrounded her suddenly found themselves in darkness as the fire extinguished. The Takiguchi man, bewildered, called for his attendants, but not a single one answered. As he looked around, he felt lost in the fields. Confused and terrified, he felt as if his life was slipping away. Despite this, he tried to survey his surroundings, and as he looked, he realized he was in a field known as Toribe. He thought to himself, "I got off my horse at Tsuchimikado, but where has my horse gone? I was supposed to turn around quickly and come from the West Daitoku. Yet, here I am." He reflected that perhaps the fire he saw on Ichijo was actually a fox's doing, but as he considered the impossibility of it, he gradually returned home on foot by midnight. The next day, he lay in bed, feeling utterly disoriented, almost as if he were dead. The Takiguchi men, waiting for him that night, remarked, "What of the one who said he would catch the fox at Koyo River and sent someone to call him back?" 3 days later, in a rather sickly state, he returned to the main residence. The Takiguchi men asked, "What of the fox from last night?" To which he replied, "I was stricken with an unbearable illness, so I could not attend. However, I intend to try again tonight." And they jested, "This time, you must catch two." In his heart, he thought, "When I was first tricked, there's no way a fox would show up tonight. If she does, I must keep hold of her all night, or else she'll escape. If she does not show up, I shall just remain hidden in the main residence." He resolved to take a number of his strongest attendants with him tonight, riding again to the Koyo River. Upon crossing the river, the girl was nowhere to be seen. As he turned back, he saw her standing by the riverbank. She was not the same girl from before. When she again called out, Please let me ride on your horse's rear. He allowed her to mount once more. As before, he secured her tightly with rope and turned towards Kyoto. As it grew dark, they traveled on, with some attendants lighting fires and others keeping watch, but not a single person came to meet them. Upon reaching the Tsuchimikado gate and dismounting, he seized the girl by her hair, and, despite her pleas to let her go, they arrived at the main residence. The Takiguchi man asked, "What now?" She replied, "Here she is." This time, they tied her tightly and dragged her inside. Though she appeared human for a moment, once they began to harm her, she transformed into a fox, and using a fire from a cedar tree, they burned her without fur and shot at her repeatedly, saying, "From now on, may you never take this form again." They did not kill her, but let her escape, and slowly but surely she fled. Then, this Takiguchi man recounted the story of how he had been tricked and taken to Toribe. After about 10 days, he decided to try again and rode to the Koyo River. This time, he found the girl looking sickly by the riverbank. The Takiguchi man, as before, urged, "Get on the rear of my horse, young one," but she responded, "I would ride, but I cannot bear being burned." This illustrates the cunning of the fox. Such events are said to have happened not long ago. Because of their strangeness, they have been passed down through stories. Thus, the story has been passed down.